Welcome to the Week 8 YouTube NAIA recap video. I was actually talking to someone last week and they were asking if I was going to start a podcast. I'm like, this is pretty much a podcast at this point, right? It's just I only uploaded it to YouTube. But I'm joined here by Stephen Brazier. I said that correctly, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yes, Stephen Brazier, for all of you guys wondering how to pronounce his name. He's the head men's volleyball coach at Simpson. How long have you been at Simpson? And give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah. So this is my third year at Simpson. So I actually played here at Simpson as well. So I went to a school in Illinois called Lindenwood Belleville. It's the sister school of the division, I guess they're Division One or Division Two, Lindenwood
Yep.
team. Played there for 2 years and then transferred to Simpson my junior year. And then played my junior, senior, and a grad year since I had the COVID year. So I'm one of the COVID kids when it comes to college. But yeah, into my third year. And yeah, I mean, I really love my team. The boys work hard, and we're in Reading, so it's a nice little place for us. I mean, we get a lot of recruits and stuff like that want to be in California, and so that's really cool. Yeah, I haven't had the best year. We've had some injuries and stuff like that, but just started conference play and looking really promising against some of the top conference teams.
I actually didn't look this up. I probably should have. But what did this past week look like for you guys? Who did you guys play? How'd it go?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're getting right into it with our conference. So pretty much every team has played each other. We have a smaller conference, just 5 teams. So the only teams that haven't played each other are Merced and PUC. But Westcliffe's 4-0 in our conference, which kind of makes sense because they're in the top 15. And then Merced is 2-1. They'll play PUC, probably end up winning that match, so they'll probably be 3-1. And then we are 2-2. So we're the third place team in our conference by the way it looks. Lost to Merced in 4, lost to Westcliff in 4. So but it was a good fight. I think we got to 20 in every single set.
Do you guys have a conference tournament, or how does that look coming at the end of the year?
Yeah. So the top 4 teams make it. So I guess just one team's going to be on the outs. And so yeah, the top 4 teams make it. Hoping to go in as the 1 seed, but probably end up being the 2 or 3 seed, and that means that we'll play the other 2 or 3 seed. And then just the winner of the conference goes to the national tournament, and that's kind of how it's always been. And last year it was a bit of an upset, right? Because Merced, I think, was number 1 going into the tournament, but they ended up losing in the finals to Westcliff.
Yeah.
And then Westcliff had a really good tournament, so it's interesting.
Very cool. Well, let's go into this past week. I know we have some notes in front of us, but it was finally, actually there have been some, but this has been the week of the most number of upsets or big games finally being played across the country. So couple different I think there's a couple different reasons for it. There's some Heart of America games going on right now, and there were some interesting results there. But also there was I think a couple schools that had their spring breaks and Midwest teams during spring break that wanted to come out West Coast. And so a couple teams, Morningside and Cornerstone, both traveled to Phoenix this past weekend to take on a couple games. And so just going through results.
And also Olivet Nazarene went to
a week ago they came out.
LA area. So
they came and
played. You always circle this one on your calendar because this is the week that all the Midwest teams come just because of their spring break. And so
I think in January more West Coast teams went Midwest, and then spring break kind of went the other way around this year. But this past week though, Benedictine Mesa beat Morningside 3-1. And there's a lot more matches that happened this past weekend, but I circled like 9 that were particularly interesting to me. And then Benedictine Mesa beat Cornerstone 3-0. That was a little bit of an upset. They really handled them pretty well though. Benny Mesa had a really good week earlier in the week. I had to hype them up, and then we ended up playing them on Saturday. We beat them 3-0. We played very well in that match. But Cornerstone came out, played a second match against Ottawa. Ottawa won that 3-0. That was probably one of the bigger upsets that we've seen this year or this week. I guess there's one other that's in there that we'll get to. And then kind of back in the Midwest, Missouri Baptist beat Cumberland in 5. That was a game that was probably a little bit closer than people from the outside might have expected that to be. Missouri Valley beat William Penn. That was a game that could have seen going either way. Mount Mercy pulled off a big upset of Missouri Baptist. Coming off of last week, it was kind of looking like Missouri Baptist was the best team out in the heart. But then, yeah, Mount Mercy jumps back and beats them. But then Mount Mercy loses on Saturday after the big win to UHSP, a program I don't know too much about. I know they're in St. Louis, but that was probably the biggest upset of this past week, and a big shock. Coming off of a big win, Mount Mercy kind of had that Missouri Baptist game probably circled on their calendar, and we're getting up for that. And then, yeah, UHSB kind of surprises them there. Then the last one was Missouri Valley beat Grandview. And so if you look at the Heart of America Conference rankings right now, it is all over the place. And as soon as we see a team looking like, hey, they might be the top team, they jump right back and lose a game. And so it's kind of interesting. What's your thoughts on, like, you're an outsider from the Midwest, you're a West Coast guy. But what's your thoughts on kind of what's going on in that conference and how that looks nationally for NAIA men's volleyball?
Yeah, I think it's really tough just because we don't necessarily get to see these teams in person, so it's hard to know like what actually went on during the match. I think Cornerstone was the big one for me, seeing that because they don't play the toughest competition, so it was kind of nice to get to see them play some of our West Coast teams that have predominantly been pretty strong. And I don't want to say they folded, no bad ill will toward them, but they lost those 2 matches, and curious to see what that kind of looks like when it comes to, I think a team like Lawrence Tech kind of dropped a little bit just because of their strength of schedule sort of thing, because the Cornerstone match was a big one and barely pulled that out. And then I think the UHSP versus
Mount
Mount
Mercy.
Mercy was definitely interesting because Mount Mercy seems to be climbing, climbing, climbing. And then they lose to a team. Like, how do you kind of rank losing to a team that's that low in the rankings, where you're also beating teams that are top 3, top 4? Like, how do you kind of quantify that when it comes to the ratings and all that kind of stuff? So,
Yeah. And when it comes to the ratings, we're both part of the committee that ranks, and we have to make decisions there. But I think there's also a realization here in seeing all these upsets, and the realization is none of us are that good that we can't have an off day,
oh yeah,
get beat, like overlook a team. Like, none of us are untouchable, right? We still have 3 teams that are undefeated with St. Xavier, Lawrence Tech, and my program. Um, but even looking at us 3, like, we lost a set to Park Gilbert this past weekend. St. Xavier dropped a set this past weekend to Trinity Christian, right? Lawrence Tech looks talented, but there's times they've hit 150 and won a match. And so, like, there's these things you look at from the outside, and again, I haven't been able to watch them on film all that much, but I think I'm realizing and looking at this like it's nobody's untouchable, and I think that should make nationals even more interesting,
yeah,
right? I think that's what it comes down to, and everyone's going to be vying for, hey, how do I get into nationals? In your conference, it's just like, hey, get hot at the right time. Whoever
yeah,
wins the tournament gets there, right? You guys know that. In our conference, where us and Ben U and maybe Hope or Ottawa or maybe even ACU trying to like fight, see, hey, could there be an at-large bid somewhere? Can we get more than one team in our conference? Everyone in the Heart of America is trying to grab as many at-large bids as possible, because I'm not going to say they're the best conference, they're not the worst conference, but they're a very even conference. And you can see that by all the upsets. And it's really hard to tell kind of how good a group of teams are when they're all beating each other.
Mhm.
So certainly one of the challenges that I think all of the Raiders are looking at right now. Um, Big matches this upcoming week. We have one that will be happening maybe when I post this video.
Oh,
I'm kind
okay.
of interested to see, yeah, depending on when I get this out, running a day behind here. Lawrence Tech plays Georgetown today on Monday. Right, as we just talked about Lawrence Tech, how good are they? Georgetown is a team on their schedule here that certainly has a shot to beat them if they're playing well.
Mhm.
That match could certainly go either way. Georgetown's a talented team as well as Lawrence Tech. So very fascinated to see how that goes. I believe it is at Georgetown. How much that makes a difference, I'm not really sure, but that'll be interesting to see. Um, and then, I mean, William Penn plays Mount Mercy on Tuesday. Missouri Baptist plays Missouri Valley on Tuesday. Indiana Tech and plays Missouri Baptist. Tougher week for Missouri Baptist. I'm interested to see how they kind of bounce back there. And then Park plays Missouri Valley. Um, One of the things I think everyone's waiting on with Park is, hey, when is their opposite going to jump
Yeah.
back, right? He played in just a couple games before he got hurt. Um, I'm sure if I'm playing them this week or any any team is about to play them, it's just kind of waiting to see what that looks like, how much that changes. Are they all of a sudden like a much more consistent team, with a big piece? Like honestly, many of us are, right? When you lose your best player, your team changes, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, my team saw that this past week. Um, we played Jamestown, and the night before we played them, one of their best players, Gavin Hackley, lefty, Oppo, broke his leg like really bad in the game
Wow.
against Hope. Yeah, he had to get stretchered out. Like I think he was in surgery during our game the next night. So like and all of a sudden they're a very different team, right? And that's true of all of us, right? If we lose our best player, like things change really fast. And so I'm interested to see how that Park versus Missouri Valley matchup goes. So, any other matches that you have circled like this week, or who do you guys play? If you're just like kind of
We
circling your own
play,
team, like, hey, I've got to
yeah.
focus on this one.
I mean, we play a couple D2 matches against Jessup.
Okay.
And so they're fun. It's their first year of their program. So it's a
Yep.
good matches. Then we play another conference match against Pacific Union, PUC.
Okay.
And so we beat them in
Is that
five last time. So
is
hopefully
that
they
home or
can.
away?
It's home. Yeah. So we
Okay.
play them away. And their gym's
Okay.
interesting. I don't know if you played in it, but
I've not. I've tried to
I'm
stay away
definitely,
from going all the way
yeah.
out there.
I'm definitely excited to play them in our own place because I think I like our gym better, which most people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that the definitely a lot of the Midwest stuff seems really interesting. I really I think people are sleeping on Mo Valley a little bit. I did get to see them in person at Jamestown, so we went to the Jamestown tournament and they were there and they were very good. They ended up beating Ben U, which I think
Yeah.
is a team that keeps rising, rising, rising.
Yeah.
And so how much does that kind of weigh that head to head versus can you put a team like Benue above them in the national rankings, even though they lost to Missouri Valley,
Hey,
but Missouri
that
Valley's losing some other matches, so it's
that
interesting.
that is a great segue into the next section here.
Yeah.
So this past weekend, the top 15 came out here, um, and I'll read off the order right
Yeah.
now. You might have it up in front of you, but let's chat about kind of how that went because Ben U and Missouri Valley is certainly part of that conversation. So, uh, number one was Masters. Number two was St. Xavier. Number three was Lawrence Tech. All three of those teams are undefeated still at this moment, but reading off as of when this came out last week. Number four was Missouri Baptist. Number five was Cornerstone. Number six was Grandview. Number seven was Mount Mercy. Number eight was Georgetown. Number nine was Park. Number 10 was Benue Mesa. 11 was Missouri Valley. 12 was Westcliff. 13 was Reinhardt. 14 was Hope International, and 15 was William Penn, after William Penn had come off that win over Grandview. But then
Yeah.
dropped out was St. Thomas, Florida, which I'm sure they're not very happy about. But there's a couple of things to talk about within that rankings. But kind of what were your thoughts on that ranking?
Yeah, I mean, I guess starting at the top, Masters, you guys are undefeated. You've played some really tough competition, especially the match this week. It was kind of, are you the best team in your conference just because you hadn't played Benue yet,
Yeah,
and you guys kind of proved it, winning in
we
three.
didn't know until Saturday either.
Yeah. Um, I mean, St. X has been really good, and they don't have a loss. I think they have wins over Benue, Mobap, Mount Mercy, and Georgetown. So those are, I mean, that's what, four top 10 ranked teams that they have
Yeah,
wins over. So it seems like they really deserve that one or two spot. Lawrence Tech undefeated, but like I said, their, I guess, validity or whatever it is kind of gets hurt a little bit by Cornerstone struggling just because their
yeah,
best win is that Cornerstone match. Um, and I think they have wins over Grandview and Penn as well, which Grandview lost, and then Penn's lost some matches earlier in the season, right?
yeah,
Mobap had a loss, and they're above the team that they lost to. Cornerstone, like we said, had a couple losses. Grandview just lost to Penn, but they still have Grandview really high, and I guess we still had Grandview very high, which is makes sense because they've been really good the rest of the year. I think Mount Mercy is probably going to jump after this next rating, just because they have a couple wins. Georgetown might be the team that's kind of letting everybody hurt themselves around them, and they might rise
yeah.
just because they haven't
No.
necessarily
Well,
lost.
and they could jump quite a bit if they beat Lawrence Tech tonight too.
Yep,
So
yep. And then yeah, I think I mean we kind of talked about Mo Valley and Ben U. They do have Ben U above Mo Valley, even though Mo Valley beat them. So that's interesting
is that
thing, I guess.
surprising to you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much I can talk about my rankings, but I did have Mo Valley above Ben
I
U.
think yeah. Let's not talk about anyone else's rankings, but you can talk about your own. Yeah.
Yeah. I did have them one spot above Ben U just because of that, just because
Uh-huh.
they beat them, and I think we as coaches think more about the head to head, whereas it might be the wins against top 10 teams maybe more important just because we can get more of a wide variety. And then yeah, team like Hope's pretty good. William Penn jumped in just because they got that win. And then I think St. Thomas is the question mark for everybody right now because I know I haven't seen them play and you haven't seen them
Yeah.
play, but they're doing really well and they've got some good wins and I think they're a new program too this year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And well, I'll talk about St. Thomas first before talking about Ben U and the Missouri Valley conversation, which is an interesting one too.
Hmm.
Um, but I think, talking how you talked about Georgetown in terms of, hey, if everyone else beats each other, they
Yeah.
could rise up. St. Thomas might be in that kind of position too, right? One of the new factors that the R chairs, the area rankings committee chairs are supposed to be considering this year is the Massey rankings. And the Massey rankings actually have St. Thomas at this moment at number 4 in the NAIA. Right? And that was them jumping up 10 spots this past week. Not
Hmm.
necessarily because they pulled off a big win, but because everyone else is beating each other. And they jumped up really high in that ranking. And I'm very interested to see, as much as they just fell out, they could easily skyrocket right back up if everyone else beats each other too, depending on kind of
Hmm.
how teams view them. Um, because you're starting to compare them to teams that are 3 and 4 and 5 loss teams, and they're a one loss team, right?
Yeah.
And their one loss is to what seemed to be like a healthy Park, Missouri team, right?
Hmm.
And so you're either going to rank them low going into the tournament, right? They're probably going to have to win their conference tournament anyway, but maybe not. Um, you either rank them low and like if you're a high seed, maybe you just don't want to see them, or they're a team that pulls off some upsets at nationals because you didn't know how to rank them, right? And so I'm very interested to see kind of where they go from that standpoint. Um, I actually, again, I won't talk about anyone else's rankings, but I actually went the other way than you
Okay.
with
Yeah.
Ben U and Missouri Valley,
Yeah.
and I'll give you my rationale. Um, I kind of put the no loss teams right up at the top, um, but it's hard to try to figure out how to rank these Heart of America teams, right?
Hmm.
And how these rankings work, and not that we have to follow them, but each conference has a group of coaches that kind of rank the teams in their conference,
Yeah.
right? And so you could go in kind of any order they want. We This year, for the first time ever, we can vote someone out of order if we want to, right?
Hmm.
And so if Missouri Valley is like number 5 in their conference, we could put them in number 1 in their conference this past week, even though those coaches had them at 5, because those are their own rankings, and it's hard to kind of justify how that exactly works. And it's getting harder each week as they all
Yeah.
beat each other too. Um, but this past week, Missouri Baptist was the first team ranked by those coaches in there, and Grandview was the second. I think Mount Mercy was the third, and Park was the fourth, and Missouri Valley was the fifth within the Heart, right? So coaches kind of followed that order. Um, but I was kind of, Ben U was second in our conference, and I was comparing Ben U's resume to Grandview's resume,
Hmm.
right? I wasn't necessarily comparing Ben U to Missouri Valley. And looking at those resumes, now again, this is a week ago, not including Ben U's cornerstone win or some others. I forget what Grandview had this week. But going into that, um, Grandview had losses to Lawrence Tech and William Penn,
Yeah.
and Ben U had losses to St. Xavier and Missouri Valley.
Yeah.
All right. And then in terms of strong wins, Ben U had wins over Westcliff and Olivet Nazarene, and Grandview's wins were over Mount Mercy and Indiana Tech. Those are they're like good quality wins, right? And,
Hmm.
and you compare those good wins, those losses, like how do you rank those teams? And I actually had Ben U right over Grandview. So I had Ben U up at like 6, and I had, Mount Mercy, or not Mount Mercy, Missouri Valley a little bit lower.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have them like one spot away from each other, even though, yeah, there was that head to head. And on the aggregate, on the whole, coaches averaged them right there head to head. Um, but I kind of had my rankings a little bit different because I was really looking at Ben U Mesa and Grandview, who were
Hmm.
both ranked second in their conferences, rather than a second place team and a fifth place team in their conference. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say there's a right or wrong. And, this past weekend, maybe I could make this argument that my rankings were a little bit more justified after Ben U had a really good week, right? They beat
Yeah.
Cornerstone, they beat Morningside, they beat Hope. So they're kind of proving themselves, and that's, good for them. And so maybe they're going to move up a little bit in the rankings after this week. Um, but you could draw a line between, oh, I beat this team, and this team beat this team, and this team beat this team.
Which
Like,
turns into triangles at that point where
yeah, right.
yeah.
Unless a team's undefeated, it turns into triangles, right?
Hmm.
And does that mean a team is necessarily better if you draw those triangles? No, not necessarily. I
Hmm.
mean, our program beat Stanford this year. Stanford beat Hawaii. Hawaii's going to pull off an upset somewhere. If Long Beach State doesn't stay undefeated on the men's side, like, I'm sure I could draw a line somewhere.
No, I
Does
think
that
you just
mean
gotta
we're
say
better
you're
than
better
Long
than
Beach State?
Hawaii at this
No.
point.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm not going to act like we're better than Long Beach State right now, though.
Yeah.
Even though you can maybe draw these lines eventually. So that's kind of the point of rankings are quite difficult. Um,
Well, I think that
so
it's nice that there's so many coaches doing the rankings as well, because
yeah,
then we can kind of get perspectives from every different coach in every different
yeah,
conference, right? I mean, we don't get to see as many of the Midwest teams, and so I think that I usually kind of fall toward their rankings a little bit more just because they've
yeah,
seen all the teams, and they probably know what they're talking about a little more than I do when I just see it on video or just look at box scores or whatever it is.
Yeah,
And so that's really nice that we kind of help each other out and it averages it all out.
yeah,
I do think the one interesting thing is that Mo Valley beat Grandview now this
yeah,
week, right?
yeah.
And so what does
So
that look like?
so Missouri Valley could be moving back up, and
Mhm.
as they move up in their conference, I think you could start looking at the head to head again closer, or at least I would in my rationale.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of different ways you can go about rationale on things for sure. So
Yeah.
um, so yeah, very interesting to see kind of how that continues to develop. There's no top 15 rankings this week. There will be another top 15 ranking published next week. The interesting thing, and this is just a little bit more inside information that you and I both know about, that this is the first week that all of the ARC chairs are going to start meeting to talk about national tournament selection and at-large bids. And it's just a preliminary and initial as we start to look at kind of what the end of the year looks like. And now that we have a good number of games under the belt, but it's getting to the point of the season that we're starting to have these conversations more and more about, if it goes this way or this way in a conference tournament, who's going to get at larges, and what are the rankings for nationals going to look like. So,
Mhm.
uh, very interesting. Well, thank you for your time, Stephen. Appreciate
Of
it.
course. Yeah.
Um, Another episode down in the books. Once
Well, I
again, if any,
watched every one, so it's nice to get to
so
join
you
one
watched
first.
every one, but I had to ask you to join. You got to see my comments about, hey, if any other coaches are watching this, please reach
Yeah.
out to me. I know I've reached out to a number of coaches, and so if we could continue doing this, that'd be great. So, but thank you, appreciate it, and good luck this week.
Of course. Thanks so much.